Welcome back, everyone, to another installment of the new gun owner orientation. Once again, I am John Correa, the founder and owner of Active Self-Protection, and I am greatly encouraged by you watching these videos if you are a new gun owner or considering becoming a gun owner. With me today, my incredible wife, Laura, who is not a meat-eating crime fighter or anything like that, but fairly new to the concealed carry game. And one of the big things that we talked about is the difference between a gun that fits me and a gun that fits you. And so I've got a host here. I've got a whole bunch of different guns. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring the fetching Laura over this way so that I can get in here and not point guns at her. So let's see. I'm going to do this thing. That's a violation of stuff, but I didn't want to point a gun at my wife. So different size guns do different size things. You see this little guy right here. This is a Ruger LCP clone, a Taurus TCP. It's very wee, super small. Now, on the other hand, we have a full-size Heckler & Koch P30 right here, much larger gun. Which one is right for you? Well, that depends. Let's talk about it. Today's video is brought to us in part by the generosity of luckygunner.com. For the best selection of name brand defensive ammunition and lightning fast shipping on bulk target ammo, head to luckygunner.com and thank them for being a sponsor of Active Self-Protection. So as we're working through these and showing you these different guns, I want you to remember the rules of firearm safety. Every time we pick a firearm up, we are going to, number one, always keep firearms pointed in a safe direction. Number two, we are always going to keep our finger off the trigger until we've made the decision to fire. And number three, we are always going to keep firearms unloaded until they're in use. And these particular firearms we are demonstrating, they are not in use, so they will all be unloaded. So one of the things that I brought Laura into this video for is, you notice I'm about 5'10" and she is not, right? She is wee, and I am definitely not wee. And the next thing you notice is our hand size. So this is my big mitt. She puts hers up next to mine, and obviously you can see our hand size is quite a bit different. And in fact, if we put them up against each other, you will notice that if we kind of put the base of our palms in the same place, that I have about an entire finger length of finger on her in terms of the size of my hands. So one of the biggest things that I see people do, the biggest mistakes they make, is they pick a gun because somebody else says they should buy that gun, and instead of buying the gun that works best for them in their particular instance. Now, I'm going to assume something today. And I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to get me in some trouble, but if you're considering buying your first firearm, I think especially for women, a lot of people say the best firearm is a revolver, that you should buy a revolver because it's simple. But quite frankly, I think that's very much the wrong choice. And the reason I think it's the wrong choice is, number one, a revolver almost always has a very heavy double action trigger pull. And because of that very heavy trigger, they're very hard to shoot well. A lot of times the ones that they get given as well are very small. They get sold these real little revolvers, but the problem with that is that hurts to shoot because you get a lot of felt recoil. So you'll see a woman that'll buy a little bitty revolver, she'll take it to the range, shoot 5 rounds through it, go, that stinks, I'm not doing that anymore, and then we're all done. So if you can, what you want to do is you want to have the biggest gun that you can comfortably carry if you're going to carry. So that's the next thing that we want to talk about here. It depends on what you're going to do with this gun. Are you going to carry this gun? Is this a gun that you are going to conceal carry? Or is this a gun that you are going to just have for home defense? Because if you're going to have a gun just for home defense, kind of the biggest one that you can reasonably store well is probably the right choice, because they're so much easier to shoot because of physics, right? So every force is, mass times acceleration, or blah, blah, blah. Force equals mass times acceleration. So what you've got there is you've got bigger mass, means that the same amount of force gives you less acceleration. So that's a good thing, right? So you want to have a bigger gun if you can, but of course when you're going to carry it, you got to hide the stupid thing. So there we go. So I'm going to show you a couple of things here that are differences here. Now I'm going to show you that this I brought out is Laura's carry gun. Notice I turned that way because I didn't want to grab the gun and point it at her, right? Because I always want to follow the rules of firearm safety. This is her carry gun. If I drop the slide, this is a safe direction over here, is her VP9 SK. And this is a very small, subcompact gun. So it's a great gun for concealed carry for a lot of people, particularly small people. You also have the small grips on here, whereas I will show you my concealed carry gun is a similar gun. It's an HK as well, a P30, but a full size with a red dot on it, so a much bigger gun, and has the bigger grips on it because of our different hand sizes. So that's a big consideration. Now you get this little tiny guy, and that little tiny guy, this Taurus TCP, yes, is very easy to conceal. I could put this in a little bitty holster, put it in my pocket, put it on my waist, very easy to conceal. But remember, it's very small, so when it comes time to shoot, it's really hard to shoot well and effectively. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things on this. So I'm going to step in front just a little bit. As if you notice, I only get one finger on this gun. So when it comes time to shoot, I might get this second one when I have the magazine in it, but I don't get my whole hand on the gun. And that makes it harder to shoot well. Now,
and I'm looking at the other side too. Your finger already, almost comes down to the muzzle.
Right? Now, if you hold this gun instead, you notice that she gets 2 fingers on that gun very well, and a third kind of hanging off. So that's when size really matters. So that's in hand size. The next thing that Laura noticed is that if I put my hand on this gun, you notice that my finger is way over the top. And again, I'm just quintuple checking that it's unloaded, but this gun is super hard for me to get my trigger finger in a place that I can drop that trigger well and effectively. A little bit easier for you, but this is even a small gun for your hand.
Yeah.
So if you tried to press that trigger, you can get there pretty well, but not super great. Now, if we move a little farther, one of the things that I want to see about hand size. This is a Springfield Hellcat. It's a very popular new gun, tiny little sucker. And if you, depending on which magazine you get in there, you can get, it's a little bit bigger. You can see I get 2 fingers on this gun. I don't get a third, which I would prefer, but I get at least 2. And I can shoot this gun quite well, especially if I get the longer extended magazines. So here's an interesting thing. You notice my finger gets on that trigger very easily. I get a little space here like I kind of would like, and I can press this trigger really well. However, in Laura's much smaller hands, I am going to lock that to the rear so that you can take a hold of that and verify it.
Thank you.
Drop that slide. Now, one of the things that we noticed when Laura was looking at this gun is that when she tried to press the trigger, many times what would happen, you got it there okay, just fine, right? So go ahead and let's cycle the action on that, okay? And what would happen sometimes is because of the size of her hand, of course you're not doing it now, that she would have a hard time, there it is, and now it lock up, and because of the size of her hand, there it finally went. We've seen other students on the line have that problem with this particular gun. So because I have big old beefy hands, not a problem in that particular instance, but because Laura has smaller hands, a little bit of a problem for her. Now we can step up from there to a slightly bigger gun. This is something like a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. This is a very popular gun for concealed carry. This one has just a little bit more. See if I can drop that. I got to drop the magazine out of that to show it to you. Okay, so you can see I get 2.5 fingers on this one, but if you hold that, notice she gets 3 fingers on that. So this is a full-size handgun for you, and again, you have the ability to press the trigger without any considerable problems with that, right?
Very thin.
Yeah, and a very thin gun. So this is what we call a single stack gun. You notice this is a super thin gun. So this gun here is just a tiny bit too small for my hands to like it, but you might really like that gun. Now, we move up to Laura's gun. This is a double stack gun, so you notice it's a little thicker. But what that gives us is a little more purchase. Now with the fact that this is a subcompact, for me, still 2 fingers on this gun. For Laura, get that 3rd finger on there and you've got plenty of gun and a little bit thicker, a little bit more beefy to hold on to your hands, right? Now then, same thing here though, because of the size, you notice here, this is a full-size HK VP9. So it's a very similar gun to the one we just picked up, but it's just larger. It's a little longer in the barrel and a little longer in the grip. So I get all 3 fingers on this gun. I have a full hand of gun here. Laura also has a full hand of gun here and some space to go. So for a concealed carry gun, you don't probably get much out of having this extra, and you get all this extra to hang off, but it does make it harder to conceal. Now my problem is that this guy here has the thin grip panels on it, so because of that, it kind of puts my finger a little far onto the trigger when I go to get after it. However, this is my carry gun that's set up for me, which is very similar in size to that HK VP9, but has the big beefy grip panels on it, and so it makes it a little larger and a little better. But if Laura tries to hold that gun,
boy,
yeah, it's a big beefy sucker, right? Yeah. And you'd have a hard time holding that gun.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the best gun for you, I can't tell you enough. The biggest thing that I want you to consider is I want you to consider your hand size. So number one, do you have enough hand size? Because your size of your hand is going to determine what's best for you, which is why her carry gun is different than my carry gun. And if you're going to have a gun for home defense, I would strongly encourage you, bigger is probably better, as long as you can get your hands around it and get your trigger finger into a comfortable place. I want you to beware of the problem that we saw with Laura's gun, with having a gun that, because her fingers are short, she couldn't get the trigger safety to ungo. And that is a significant problem. And when you find that on a gun for you, you want to get the heck rid of that particular choice. And I get it, these little bitty, little tiny suckers are tempting because they're so easy to conceal. But recognize, number one, they probably don't fit your hand very well. And number two, they stink to shoot. So I would recommend bigger rather than smaller. Now, that's kind of backwards because especially a lot of women, they get taught to pink it and shrink it. They get taught to buy the smallest gun that they can. And also, again, I don't recommend a revolver. If that's what you got sold and that's what you have, okay, fine, we work with that. But it's going to be a gun that's really hard for you to shoot well. And the reason that you probably bought a gun is so that if, God forbid, you had to shoot somebody, you could. And if the day comes where you have to use it, that's when you want it to be as shootable as you can. So, a couple things. I would go to a range, if possible, if you haven't already bought your gun, go to a range that rents firearms. Go to one that you can try several. In most places, good gun stores, if you're going to buy a gun and they have a range there, they'll rent you several. Might cost you 20, 30, 40 bucks or something, and then let you try a whole bunch of guns. And in that process then, look for hand fit. Can I put my whole hand on this gun? Can I get to the trigger? Oh, does this gun fit my hand better? Now that's not the same as saying, is it comfortable? That's saying, can I get a full grip on this gun? Do all my fingers fit on it? Can my trigger finger get to the trigger adequately? Can I press it straight to the rear? Can I get both hands on the gun in a comfortable manner and in a way that the gun functions well? If you can do that, well, that depends on your hand size, as Mrs. Laura's and mine did. And that's why we carry different guns. And don't let anybody else tell you which is the right gun for you. Go and try a bunch. Thanks for your help today, dear.
Yeah.